We're here today with Ron Keller talking about his book, Hidden Enemies in Ministry. So first, I just want to say thanks to you, Ron, for joining us.
Well, thanks, Scott. I really appreciate this opportunity because anything to get the book out is certainly something I desire.
Well, great. Well, let's just start by you kind of telling us a little bit about your book, and within that, you can weave in some about yourself as well.
Sure. Well, I've been lead pastor of a church for 43 years, starting with a church running about 40 people. I've pastored a church of over 4,000, and I've actually was at that church two different times for a period of 34 years at one church. It was called Christ Church of the Valley in San Dimas, California. So I actually grew up in that church. And because the church was a mega church, we had a lot of young people in the church. And I felt like, I imagine there's people in the church that are considering going into the ministry. And so toward the end of my time there, which was back in 2005, that's when I resigned. But just before that, maybe for 2 years, I conducted a class called Everything You Want to Know About the Ministry, but you don't learn about it in seminary. So things that I've learned in the ministry that I was never taught in seminary. And I had about 25 kids, young people that came. Some of those have actually gone into the ministry. And so my book was kind of birthed out of all of my experiences in the ministry and sharing things that you would never learn otherwise. So that's kind of the idea behind it. I really want to help young pastors. That's a goal of the book. Yes, it has limited interest because you need to be a pastor. You need to be somebody in the ministry to appreciate it. Or you can be somebody who goes to church every Sunday and wonders, what does the pastor do? And what are some of the problems that the pastor faces? And so you'll learn a whole lot about what the ministry is all about.
Was there a time you look back on, because you talked about you had that class back in the early 2000s. Is there a time where you look back and have a point of inspiration, or what was the process of like getting this book written out and getting the words on the page?
Yeah. Well, it actually came very easily because I really believe that the Lord helped me a great deal with this book. I think the Lord wanted this book out. I honestly believe that. I'm not saying that God spoke to me, but it went so easy. And I actually start when I'm about 10 years of age and talk about my life in the church and the ministry that I was involved in as a teenager, and talk about times when I was a youth pastor and then becoming lead pastor of a church. And so I take each church that I've been at, the problems I faced at each church, and how I dealt with those problems, and how I should have dealt with those problems. So each chapter then has a great application to it. Yeah. The book is actually divided into 3 sections. The first section is my ministry. So that takes me from the time I was the first church I ever had of 40 people, all the way up to the time I retired of a church running over 4,000. Then the second section of the book deals with my message. And the thing I want to say in that is I believe that there's a lot of politically correct pastors today, and they're afraid to talk about what's really going on in society. And I think that pastors today have gotten away from good expository preaching. There's too much topical preaching. And yet, on the other hand, there's a need for topical preaching. But we need to talk about what's happening in our society. And there's just too many pastors that honestly are afraid of offending the congregation. And so they become seeker sensitive. And I'm not a seeker sensitive pastor. So I talk about subjects that pastors ignore from the pulpit that are very biblical and that they need to talk about. And the third section of my book deals with my memories. That is things that I have done. I've traveled all over the world. I've preached all over the world. And so experiences that I have faced sort of as a missionary, you might say. And some of the cultural differences between living here in the United States and say preaching in Japan or preaching in Russia or preaching in South America or places like that. So it's kind of lessons to be learned that way for people who are missionaries. So that's the three sections of the book: my ministry, my message, and my memories.
So it sounds like it's been in works since the beginning. It's your whole life. And then now as you're almost to this point of leaving a legacy and inspiring, as you said earlier, young pastors, you get the chance to put pen to paper and write this book out.
Yeah, I'm believing it for a legacy for my kids because it has my life. My life is tied up in this book. Who I am as a person is tied up in this book. But I think there's a lot of lessons that every pastor can learn from it. There's nothing like experience. And I've had 60 years of experience in the ministry. I'm still teaching. So even though I'm not a lead pastor any longer, I still draw a salary. I still teach every week. And so I'm still involved with people. I'm still involved with churches. So I know what's going on. And that's why I get the 60 years out of this.
Yeah. Well, any last parting words for us today?
Well, the parting words would be, if you're contemplating entering the ministry, you need to have this book. If you're in the ministry, you're going to see a lot of things that I've gone through that maybe you've gone through, or things that you will be going through, and therefore learn from my experience. That's what I want you to do. Learn from my experience. Don't make the same mistakes that I've made, and you will have a more successful ministry. My ministry's been successful, but it's been successful because I have learned from my mistakes that I have made. In fact, the opening chapter of the book deals with soar like an eagle. And what I do is I compare eagle leaders with turkey leaders. And so there's a difference between being an eagle and being a turkey. And I'm not always saying that I've been an eagle, because there's been many turkey experiences. In fact, that's what makes the book. If I would tell you all the good things that have happened in my ministry, it would not be nearly as valuable as if I talk about the mistakes and the failures that I've had.
Yeah.
So I'm helping people not be a turkey, but to be an eagle, and how to raise up eagles in the congregation, or how to take somebody who is a turkey and turn them into an eagle. That's the opening chapter of the book. Yeah. And then I deal with, from there on, what my ministry is all about.
Yeah. I love that visual. And I've heard it said, somebody once say, and not insulting you, but you've paid the dumb tax and you're sparing us of that.
No, that's a good way of putting it. Yeah. I'm trying to spare people some problems here.
There you go. Well, get out there, grab a copy of Ron's book, Hidden Enemies in Ministry. It's available online through Amazon, Barnes & Noble, many other different avenues as well. And maybe you prefer to read on a Kindle or something along those lines. It's available in that format as well through those outlets online. So again, thank you, Ron, for joining us.
I just want to say the subtitle of that book is What I've Learned in the Ministry That I Never Learned in Seminary. That's the kind of the subtitle of it.
There you go.
So yeah, get that book and you'll find it very, very interesting, I think.
60 years plus of knowledge in there.
Yeah, what I've learned in 60 years that I never learned in seminary. There are a lot of enemies in the church, a lot of enemies. Satan wants to destroy the pastor, and he wants to destroy the church. So we talk about that.
Absolutely. Some good stuff. Thank you, Ron.